Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Sadie, and today I will show you how I created this medieval fantasy village without custom content on a 50 by 50 lot. We will take an in-depth look on terrain manipulation, creating shapes and roofing, and I will also show you how I used the tool mod for detailing. I hope you will enjoy the video, and without further ado, let's dive right into the speed build. I started by raising up a hill with the raised terrain tool, and then I flattened it with the flatten tool. Then I started to place the buildings, and I do that almost always by placing the default rooms from the catalog, before playing around with their sizes and heats. I feel like creating shapes this way gives me more control over proportions and also makes roofing a bit easier later on. I just kept placing boxes to create different shapes and an interesting silhouette. Then I started placing some roofs, and some of them I wanted to be kinda crooked. To achieve that look, I placed two half gabled roofs, which I will later on bend with different degrees. I continued to place roofing on the little boxes, played around with the heats and shapes until I was happy with the look. Moving on to the terrain, I started out by placing some round decks, before I worked out the slopes. What you need to create these is really just the flatten and the smoothing terrain tool. First, select the flatten tool and start clicking around on the edge of your platform. The lines that go around the terrain indicate the different heats, and when you slide over these lines with the flatten tool, it somewhat snaps to these lines. All you want to do is raising and lowering along these lines to create a slope. Do short clicks and lower the intensity of your tool if needed. Just be patient until you have a clear path of grass with no default terrain showing through. This means you achieved functionality and your slope is walkable. If you find any harsh edges that you don't want, try out the smoothing tool also. It helps unify the terrain to the heat you snapped on and can also be very helpful if the flatten tool is just a bit too strong for the adjustment you need to make. You can see me using it to remove some bumps on the slope's edges. Creating slopes is definitely tedious and time consuming, but once you are familiar with the flatten tool, it only gets easier and easier. When the terrain tools first came out, I remember having such a hard time using them, and it's still not easy, but definitely not as frustrating as it was like 2 years ago. I actually can't remember how long we got them now, but it's been enough time to practice. Once 2 of the slopes were done, I changed up some foundation, fences, and then I painted in some cobblestone, just to make sure it looks as I envisioned it and it doesn't feel off. Once all the slopes and platforms were good to go, I went in with some more terrain paint. This time I picked the same color of the default terrain to conceal the edges and make the slopes appear more polished. And after all of this was done, I posted a picture of it and I got completely overwhelmed by the positive feedback from you guys, like on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit. I never had so many comments under anything I've uploaded. It was just totally mind-blowing to me. Many of you guys asked for the shell, and I know I said I won't upload it, but I guess what would be more fitting to celebrate 100 uploads to my gallery than seeing what you guys would do with a shell like this. So while writing this voiceover down, I decided to prepare a shell challenge for you guys, and I will put info for that into the description box. Now back to what I did with this shell, which was, surprise surprise, putting it on a bigger lot. I'm sorry, I really couldn't resist. Looking at the small shell just made me want to continue building up the street on top, and I had this idea of mirroring the terrain, which I started doing. I raised the same heats of the platforms and placed buildings on them in the same manner as for the left side. Box after box, roof after roof, and slope after slope. What we are watching here is actually not my first attempt of doing this. It's my second, as I lost everything from the moment I started with the second half to the point where the shell and the terrainscaping was pretty much done, due to me not saving and the game crashing on me. Please, don't be me and save your game regularly. I will speed up this part a bit, as I really just did the same things that I explained on the first half. As I mentioned already, this is my 100th upload to the gallery, and though I usually love to create replica, every now and then I love to build something that springs out of my own imagination. And I actually had so much fun building this. Maybe even a bit too much, which you will probably agree on later. I just felt a Mindstone upload should be something that's in a way personal or comforting, so I tried to capture a few of my favorite things with this build. I love everything medieval and fantasy, and I also aim to take the aesthetics of my builds as far away from modern times as possible. I also have a strange addiction to all things turquoise and blue, so I really stayed right in my comfort zone with the style and colors of this build. Even though I stayed in my comfort zone, picking out roof and wall colors was quite a journey. It went from very colorful to only thatched roofs, went from simple stone walls to a bit of timbering. Well, at one point I was happy and nothing took away from the shape too much. So I started placing windows, figuring out which shapes and colors would fit. I ended up with a mix of windows in dark and medium brown swatches, and also some blue doors to complement the roof colors. Then I started with the most time-consuming part, the detailing. I first placed down some columns that would support the roofs, added and changed up some windows, and then placed a few balconies. I noticed I cut out the part where I placed the wooden gates on the platforms, which are from the Strangerville debug. After that I placed some rounded awnings, changed up the foundation, and went on to add chimneys. With the chimneys I'm always pretty random. I just make sure the color fits and then just keep checking the silhouette to see where the roofing seems kinda blank. Got an open space, shove a chimney in there. Once I was somewhat happy with the roof decor, I went on to add more details to the walls. I enlarged a wooden debug post and placed it on the edges of a few houses. For that I used the tool mod, which allowed me to lower them, move them around, and also clone and resize them. The tool mod has a bunch of awesome new features, which are incredibly helpful for detailing. With a shift click on an object in live mode, it opens up a variety of useful possibilities, including toggle active object. Clicking this will make your item appear green, and so it is selected. When you then click on an open spot while holding Alt, it will pull the item in the direction you are clicking on, which lets you move items with so much more precision. After placing some awnings and barrels, I replaced the lowest tier of that tower with a barrel post from the Cats and Dogs debug. I think it looked pretty awesome, and I don't really know why I never thought of this before. Maybe it's the colors of this build, but it just fitted perfectly. I then added more wooden details wherever I thought the build would need them, including the slopes. Similar to a slope in a Legend of Zelda replica I did a while ago, I combined a wooden plank with wooden posts and lowered them into the ground to create steps up the hills. They got no footprint to them, so Sims will walk right over them. Then I gave some more detail to the bare terrain that was too prominent, with some stone fences and lawn parts from the debug. I just loved working out all the round shapes, and I definitely feel like they gave the build those fantasy vibes I aimed for. After adding some cuteness with the get-together flower boxes, I kept on adding more details with wooden planks, lanterns and a good bunch of other debug items. Then, oh boy, then started what was about to take me multiple days, lots of coffee, and I really don't know what made me pull through this, but I did. I used a package from the debug as pathing stones and I had to rotate and place them all at the right angle to line up with the slopes. Again, the new group support function of T.O.O.L made it easier, but not really less time consuming. I placed them all in a line, holding and rotating with Alt. Group selected and rotated them for around 25 degrees. Then I had to fix their heats with the elevating function of T.O.O.L. Doing this all over the village actually took me as long as the rest of the build combined, so instead of letting you watch 20 minutes of me placing stones, here is a little montage of how I placed pathing stones for hours and hours and hours and
one eternity later.
Hours. If I went insane, you wonder? Maybe a tiny little bit. But I definitely think it was worth all the hours. It is probably one of my favorite builds I've done so far. And if that wasn't enough, I also decided to add the wooden steps to every single slope. I finished off the exterior with some shading under the wooden steps before I went on to the interior. And here we are, watching a little slideshow of the interior, which means we're at the end of the video. As I mentioned earlier, I will put the small shell up as a challenge soon, but for now you can get the finished medieval village without CC from my gallery. It's a 50 by 50 lot and you can use it as an art center, a bar, a museum, a nightclub, a restaurant, a retail store, and of course as a residence with 4 bedrooms. I will put a link to the build as well as to all creators I mentioned in the description box down below. I hope you enjoyed the video and until next time, bye bye!